Can you hear me? Is it time for me to? Oh, I got like 30 more seconds, so I'll be quiet for 30 seconds. No. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to be honest. I am actually surprised how many people are here tonight. Usually, this is one of our worst meetings because schools are starting, people are finishing summer vacations. It's still hot outside, and this year the smoke's so thick you can't even see across the street. That usually slows a lot of people down. So thank you. We've got a lot of new faces here tonight. Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kim, KI0E, the club president. We're the, what? Oh, never mind. You weren't talking to me. Okay. Past events we've had. We always start out talking about past events and upcoming events. Our last big one was Field Day. Weather was very interesting. Not as big of a turnout as we'd like to have seen, but weather and, in my case, mechanical issues kind of screwed it up. But from what I've heard, it was a good time that was had. I know it was great food because somebody brought me some of the leftovers from lunch, and they were really good. Any comments from you guys that were up there? I don't think it's ever been a problem at a Southwest Idaho event. We got the tent repaired while we were there. So that is good. I don't remember. You said you got the bulletin, got all of the bonus points, or at least most of them, which we usually do because we like to operate off grid for the most part when we're out at stuff like that. Perfect. That's what we need. Um, so that was our last big event. July is always so hot here in the valley that we don't normally do an event in July. Um, but we did do a POTO run, which we took a couple of vehicles and activated 13 or 14 parks. I don't remember. I got to harass Jamie again because I emailed him. I sent yours to him, and he's like, oh, yeah, I got to work on that. We activated like 13, 14 parks in one day. We operated from at least 6 meters through 3 centimeters. Um, I will say there's not a lot of people who have talked on 10 gigahertz FM while driving down the road, but Don and I talked regularly on 10 gigahertz driving down the road. Um, it is very, very much line of sight. Yes, it wasn't my pickup. Um, but I think we had a good. Did you have a good time, Don? Have a good time, Alan. Once we get the logs all done for you guys, you'll have, I think, N1CC, but I'm not positive. I know you'll get 6-pack activator, 6-pack hunter, and probably some others. Is it the Warthog Rover? That's for a number of parks in a 24-hour period. We drove and hit a bunch of parks, real quick, dirty activations, and moved on to the next one. Um, Many of us here, not all, helped out in an event in the Sawtooth um, Forest outside of Sun Valley. It's called the Stanhope Ultra Challenge. It's a crazy person race, as I call it. There are people who enjoy running long distances in the mountains. There were, I think 61 people signed up to run 100 miles in the mountains. This particular race goes over 9,000 feet at least twice that I know of. It surrounds one of the 11,000 peaks in Idaho. And we went up to set up communications in an area that has zero infrastructure inside of it. There is a repeater in town on the top of Bald Mountain where the ski area is that you could talk to from in town and a little bit of the race course, but it wouldn't cover more than about 15% of the race course. So we go up and set up portable repeaters at, well, we call one site the top of the world because it's at almost 9,000 feet. The first year that we were up there, I'm watching what looked like a Boeing 737 that took off from the Haley Airport, and it's down below me behind the mountains as it's taking off to head out of the valley. Kind of weird looking down on the top of a jumbo jet when you're standing on the ground. We had some issues. Some new things came up that hadn't happened. First issue was, is anybody heard that Idaho's had a few fires? I think Oregon's had a lot more, but Idaho's had a few. The Ohio Gulch fire outside of Haley is where we go to put up one of our repeaters. And when they finally got the fire contained, controlled, and would allow us to go up, the fire was within, I think, 100 yards of the road. Many places it was within a quarter of a mile of the road, and they used the road that we go up to cut the fire line if the fire made it past there. So we were lucky to even go up there. We spent a couple of days earlier that week just trying to find other spots that we could get up high enough and cover the course, but we couldn't find them. We get our equipment set up, and now we were at like 7,000 and 8,000 feet. Do you guys remember how hot it was here, a few weeks ago? It was just as hot at 8,000 feet as it was down here in the valley. It was 90 degrees in the daytime. We don't want to talk about the ant problem, but we set up a portable repeater, real simple suitcase thing. It has 2 mobile radios hooked up to a repeater controller, and because of the heat, and this year's race had like twice as many runners, so a lot more of activity on the air, the repeater was overheating and something was self-oscillating. So after 30 seconds of somebody transmitting, you'd hear the train horn in the background that would get louder. They'd stop transmitting, next person would come on. If they stopped transmitting for just a few seconds, the train horn would be back almost immediately. If it got to cool off for like a minute or two, it would take another minute or two for the train horn to come back. I still haven't figured out what it was, but I know it was something heat related just because of how it was acting. Wish I knew if it was a radio or controller, but I have no idea. Another issue we had between the ants that might have got into the connector and chewed on it a little, the wind, which was blowing everything around, and the heat, one of the connections from a solar charge controller wasn't connecting very well. We looked at the site, we monitored the solar at the site when we tore it down, and like the first day we got good half a day of sun, the battery was fully charged. The next day it had about an hour and a half of sun. The third day it had about 30 minutes of sun actually charging, and our battery was almost dead. Okay, who understands or knows what the idea of a link budget is in radio? Not lots of hands, which doesn't surprise me. When you're talking about trying to get communications from point A to point B, almost all of them, especially if they're line of sight, depending upon the band you're on, if you have a set amount of power, you're basically guaranteed that the signal will go through. Between one of our repeater sites and a crossband repeater that we use to talk to it, our link budget was like that much over the maximum power that we had. As soon as the battery started going low because we weren't getting the solar charging, we couldn't get the signal through. So on our crossband radio that we were using, the signal that was coming through when things were working good, it was an S1 signal. That's how weak the signal was, but perfectly readable, understandable, no problem. But as soon as our power of the battery went down, what do you think happened to the power of the amplifier of that radio system? It dropped as well. So come Saturday afternoon, we weren't able to make that connection because we didn't have enough extra margin. So it made some of the communications at that event very stressful, and the fire made it even worse to begin with. But overall, I think it went well. What do you say, Brian? Larry? We had issues, but we worked through them, and that's the best thing. Well, and we only had 2 new people in the Flat Tire Club. So the long story of this event, many of us have been helping at it for quite a few years. One year, a person had like 5 flat tires before we got home. And every year since then, there's usually at least 1 flat tire at the event. And Larry is one of our Flat Tire Award recipients this year. it, I wasn't going to say anything about you. Steve is the one who had 5 flat tires the very first year. It was interesting trying to go to these places that we've never been to see if we can even get there to try and set up radio equipment. But yeah, it's what? Yes, going to field day, hit the block of wood in the road. We have fun. Okay, so with that, that's all of our past events. If anybody wants to write down what's coming up, our POTA Picnic is our August event, which is actually coming up a week from this Saturday. We will be at Wild Rose Park outside of Emmett. It's on Black Canyon Reservoir. The plan is that we'll start setting stuff up at 9 o'clock in the morning while it's still cooler, because I don't know what the weather's going to be like in a week and a half, or the smoke. And we'll have lunch with the club providing hot dogs and hamburgers at about 11:30. So if you could bring a side to share with people, that would be great. Saturday the 15th. And it should be on Ham Club Online, so everybody that's signed up on there will get an email. I think we got an event created on Facebook, so we're trying to get advertising going out better. September is our swap meet again, September 19th from 9 to 12. Start setting up at 8 o'clock. It's at 607 14th Avenue North in Nampa. Exact same place we had it this spring. Same deal. Should be a good time. The next decent event we have coming up is Jamboree on the Air. So for those of you that are fairly new, we try hard to support getting youth on the air especially. One of the biggest youth on the air events is the Boy Scouts, or actually it's now Scouting America's Jamboree on the Air. Yes. There are scouts from all over the world that will set up for this. We're going to set up at Eagle Island State Park on October 17th, operating all the bands that are available. We plan on being there from at least 10 to 2. Don't have any idea what we'll have for lunch yet, but we'll provide at least a main course for lunch as well. So bring anybody and everybody you can, any scouts, youth. I know last year from it, we ended up with 2 kids who came and tested with us after us and are now licensed hams. James and I can't remember the other one's name. It's a good fun event, and it has quite a bit of publicity being for Scouts on the Air. And Next meeting in September is September. We're going to talk about what to look for when buying used equipment. I'll bring in some of the test equipment. I'm going to be doing it. We'll show you kind of how you can check power output on a radio, and we'll have that at the swap meet. So if you're buying a used radio, you can see, okay, does it put out the 50 watts that it's supposed to? We'll have dummy loads. We'll have a spectrum analyzer so you can see, at least get an idea of, is it functional or not? Because one of the things that I hate, you go buy a used radio, you plunk down good hard-earned money, and the salesperson promises you that it's perfect. He's never used it before, and as soon as you get it home, it doesn't even power on. But we'll have, a battery system there as well as AC, so we can test some of this stuff to help you make sure you're getting good equipment. And I'm not trying to imply that anybody in this room would cheat you, but not everybody knows what they have. And a lot of times they'll sell stuff unknown, and we've had people from out of the area a long ways come to some of our swap meets before, so it's a lot harder to go knock on their door if something doesn't work. So that's what we're doing in September. October is Mike with Digital Communications. Is that right? FL Digi. Who knows what FL Digi is? It is a digital communications suite that has multiple protocols and is used primarily for keyboard-to-keyboard communications on HF. So you can talk around the world, and most of it's keyboard-to-keyboard, which is a little easier to understand sometimes, especially if you're sending messages. So we'll talk about that. And then November, or October, November, we're going to talk about building antennas with Mr. Allen. And then in November, we've got to check with the facility. The plan is we will have an antenna build at the Nampa Public Library, and we'll have multiple antenna kits you can buy and help you build and assemble and learn how to make your own antenna. I know quite a few of us have done it in the past, and it's a lot of fun making your own antenna and actually putting it on the air and seeing how well it works. So that's most of our big events. Of course, December, the best event ever is going to be the Christmas party, and we will have our White Elephant gift exchange like normal. For those of you who have not been there, the White Elephant gift exchange is always a lot of fun because there's especially some fun T-shirts, some fun tools. We have a raffle with prizes, with door prizes. We usually do like a 50-50 cash raffle. And we have a lot of fun, and we give out our annual awards. So if you can think of any award that you think somebody should earn, let me know, including the big Ham of the Year, Amateur of the Year, and Youth of the Year. But I already know who I want to nominate for Youth of the Year. Who got so excited when he got his call sign? Okay, I think that's all I have to talk about. So we're going to turn it over to Mr. Steve, who's going to talk to you about sounding good on the repeater. And I'm going to say not just on the repeater, in general. I don't like listening to the adults on Charlie Brown because I can never understand what they say. And how many of you have heard somebody like that on the radio before? So,
So a lot of this thoughts on this presentation came from, like Kim was discussing up at Stanhope. It started out some of the technical issues we were having, but also some of the communication issues we were having, different people and stuff. So it just came up as a good refresher for those of us who've been around for a while, and good information for those just getting in, joining us in the hobby. Why does your audio matter? When we talk on the repeater, what you're getting out, like Kim alluded to, what we're getting out on the other side is not necessarily your signal. It's having to go through all the audio processing on the repeater, in and out. So marginal signal, but good audio quality, can go a long way on a repeater. But conversely, a 5.9 or an S9 signal into the repeater with poor audio quality is still going to be poor audio quality back out. On a net, when we're doing events and stuff, it causes confusion, stress. When we've got lost airtime, things don't get through. And it really gets challenging because most of the time we don't hear our own audio back out. If you do, we've got squelch feedback and a whine on the system, so that's a whole other issue. 3 things primarily determine how you sound. Signal quality into the repeater. If you have very poor signal, there's nothing there to carry the audio. So you're still going to have poor audio out. Deviation, how far you hold the microphone from your mouth. Whether you're holding the microphone out here or you're holding it right here. It's going to affect how your audio sounds. Mic technique, mic conditions, and or background noise. To fully understand a lot of this, you kind of got to step back and look at the radio theory behind it. So the top signal there is an audio signal. The middle signal is how it comes out on AM. The envelope, the amplitude of the AM signal, envelopes the amplitude of your audio. Signal sideband is a lot harder to understand. Took me a bit to grasp my head around it. Signal sideband, there is no carrier. It transforms your audio along with the carrier, and that's what's coming out. Interesting fact on that I learned while presenting this, on an AM signal, a good portion of your power, I think it's like 60%, is carrying your carrier, not your audio signal. So that's why a single sideband signal is used, because all of that power can now be carried to carry your voice or your message, not necessarily just the carrier. And on an FM signal, the amplitude stays constant, but you'll notice the wavelength gets larger and shorter. And that's changing the frequency is what it's demodulating out. Pros and cons to all. AM and single sideband, if you've got stacking of multiple signals, you usually can hear through it and pull stuff out. FM, if you got 2 strong signals going into a repeater, most of the time they're just going to blank each other out and you're not going to get anything out of it. But that same fact, because of the way they blank out of it and FM stays, it's usually a lot cleaner, crisper audio. You don't have as much background noise, as much fatigue trying to understand it. And if anybody has anything to interject, please. Yes. Capture I'm not extremely familiar with.
Your radio's off 10%. It gets a strong enough signal, it locks into the carrier, so the audio sounds what you would expect. With sideband, for everybody who's used sideband, as you spin the dial, it goes from squeaky Mickey Mouse to squawky Daffy Duck, because you're not locked into it. And sometimes that makes it better because you can understand, but with AM and FM, if you're off a little, it locks into the carrier.
What is deviation? You'll hear a lot about deviation. 5 kilohertz deviation is the bandwidth for an FM is bandwidth. And 3 kilohertz deviation at 100 hertz tone is what a lot of repeater systems are set at. What is deviation? Well, that is how much the voice or signal is going up and down. Deviation is what, when it comes to the microphone input, FM and all them, your deviation is how much is the amount of deviation correlates to the volume. Like I said, FM, higher is going to squeeze together, lower is going to get further apart from that base carrier frequency. Loudness versus pitch. There is occasionally a misconception that a higher pitch is not going to be as loud. That in as far as the deviation and the signal behind it, that is not the case, with the exception unless you're getting too outside the normal range where you start getting into the audio filtering that's going on in your radio. Because most FM radios, it's typically a range of about 300 hertz to 3 kilohertz is the audio range they transfer through. They scrub the under 300 out because that is where your PL tones reside. What does good sound like? And I will forewarn you, some of these may get a little hot. That's by design as we go through here.
Radio test. Radio test. 1, 2, 3. KJ7 NYE.
So that's the base audio signal as you can see it there. Runs, deviations ran fairly close to good on. And you can see as you look at the heat spectrum what the FM looks like, or if you're watching this on a scope on a radio over time, you're getting out, your kilohertz are getting up about 4, a little more, 3 there, nice and spread out. The first issue we're going to talk about is low volume. And there's 2 conditions that'll can lead into a signal being low volume. Oh, sorry, I forgot about this. So what you're seeing on all of these will be the same exact audio clip. There is a zoomed in section there. That is where I'm giving my call sign. A couple of the constants that I give my call sign. They kind of show it a little more detail. Like I said, peaks are reaching the reference line. Is it me or the repeater? A couple of hints to trying to chase these things down for it. Ask for multiple signal reports. Because if we ask Kim for a signal report in his truck, we're probably not going to get one. Sorry, Kim, we have to. Listen on the repeater input. If you've got a secondary radio, being able to put it on the repeater input and see what you're sounding like. And there again, troubleshooting. You can listen on the repeater input, repeater output, so you can see, is this coming through the repeater? When you're trying to help somebody diagnose a repeater, is this the audio that's going in, or is this the audio that's coming out? Is it bad for everybody on the machine? Indicator, it's probably the repeater. Does it go away when we're in simplex? Changes when you're moving. Quite common picket fencing, which we won't get into a lot of the details on here. There's a problem common because you're getting multiple paths bouncing off of things as you're moving and driving down the road. Deviation budget. As we alluded to, smaller towards the center, you're not using your full budget. Correct is plus or minus 5 kilohertz. AM overdriven, the signal there, same signal there, you see driven to 9 kilohertz. That's when you're going to start experiencing clipping, where you start losing the highs in the signal, starts to sound distorted. We'll kind of have some of those examples here in just a second.
Radio test. Radio test. 1, 2, 3. KJ7 NYE.
Under deviation, what's probably one of the most common things is, and fixes for this, is like we discussed earlier, your mic position, making sure your mic's in a good position, but not too close. Angle on a mic, usually a little bit of an angle will help. They say about 2 inches away from your mouth. If you are somebody who speaks softer, you may have to go into your radios and update and change your mic gain so you're giving out a good signal so you don't feel like you're having to yell into it to be heard all the time. As you can see the signal there, a lot trimmer, a lot smaller when you look at it, not nearly as high. narrow on a wide repeater. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do we have are all ham radios one way or the other, or they mix back and forth?
Radio test. Radio test. 1, 2, 3. KJ7 NYE.
So, yes, audio level is down because it's expecting full 5 kilohertz deviation when it's only getting 2.5 kilohertz. The other thing you'll notice is because of that, the tone shifted on the audio also, and it's a little more muffled because of that. This is, like Kim alluded to, this is primarily resolved through a radio setting, and not that I'm condoning it or saying it's right or wrong, but it's something you have to watch if you have LMR frequencies in your ham gear or vice versa. You see, close up, really concise, really. So there's two ways to be quiet there. One is under deviation, and one is just mine just went narrow, wide, and narrow settings there. And you can see they look differently, they sound a little differently. So it can be hard to chase exactly what it is. Yep. Next couple of samples are going to be too loud. High over deviation.
Radio test. Radio test. 1, 2, 3. KJ7 NYE.
So as you can see here, there, very loud. Starts to be hard to understand because a little bit of clipping starts to occur. Deviation. Signal there over your reference points. Wide radio on a narrow, like we're saying, is the other.
Radio test. Radio test. 1, 2, 3. KJ7 NYE.
If you notice, it's a lot louder, but it was a lot deeper because of where it's clipping the audio off at and how the modulation there starts getting distorted. You can see both methods there. They look a little different. They're again hard to see where you're supposed to be reference correct. What's interesting, and we're talking about how it falls off at different spots, wide into narrow, we lose a lot more of that higher frequency sound. Hence why it starts to sound deeper, a lot more mumbled, versus if it's over over modulated, over deviated. Kind of a little bit as we were discussing on the wide and narrow. Your 25 kilohertz and your 5 kilohertz, you can see how kind of audio lays out there on top of each other, where you're leaving, either you're not using enough or you're leaving parts of the tails outside of the clipping zone, and why they sound differently. Distorted. Mic too close.
Radio test. Radio test. 1, 2, 3. KJ7 NYE.
One of the things I notice out of there primarily is the poppiness of it. You start to hear the consonants, a little bit of clipping. What they refer to as booming. That the tweaking that was done on this audio doesn't give it quite as much as I've heard on the radio, but the other distorted that we run into is muffled. And radios causes blocked ports, fingers over the mic, holding the mic backwards. Something got dropped on the mic in the truck. Now the port in the microphone case is now clogged. True story. And it wasn't Kim's.
Radio test. Radio test. 1, 2, 3. KJ7 NYE.
Again, very hard to tell the difference between them. A lot muffleder. Trying to understand that if you're in a busy room, 3 people trying to talk to you, etc., can be very, very difficult. You look like you're thinking something, Kim. Okay. Again, multiple ways to be unreadable. The typical delineation between them is what frequencies are you getting, or what tones are you getting through? Kind of diagnosing. Correct. As we were discussing earlier with the tuning, when we're tuning repeaters, that's kind of what we're watching inside the controller, is the audio coming in from we give it a known signal, and then we're measuring that voltage across the input into the repeater on the input and output to see how it's going. I will say the other thing on the muffled and unreadable, if you're using some of these radios that have data ports on the back of them, and you're trying to listen through audio on the computer through the data port, some of your data ports, depending on the radio, some of them are discriminated and some are non-discriminant audio. Pretty much, one is what's the raw audio that's coming off the RF chain, and then the other one is after it's been filtered, they typically do some tuning to bring sounds more level to how the human ear hears them. So when your RX path in your radio comes in, gets filtered, and then becomes non-discriminate audio, gets transmitted across, and then once it's transmitted across, it goes then back through the RF path, comes out, and then goes into the audio path. And most of your audio are going to turn around and add those filters and that sound back in to tune it so it's a more pleasant sound to the ear. One of the big ones I'm aware of is when you're talking the frequency of 9600 versus I believe it's 1200 baud rate. If you're doing Vera, the radio has to have non-discriminate outputs on it to do one versus the other. So a lot of your older radios with DIN ports and stuff like that, some may have two audio outputs on them, discriminated and undiscriminated. So that could be, if you're try to plug it into a speaker, try to plug it into a computer and record the audio, and you're getting real bad audio, that could be part of it also. Yes, emphasizing the emphasize. Thank you. That's the term I was not just. The one thing you can control primarily is mic position and mic gain. Mic gain, as just discussed, can help compensate for the mic, but if the mic's so far out it's not picking anything up, it's still not going to come over. It can only take and make the signal boost what signal it's getting. But it can help, like I said, if you've got a softer voice that's hard to get a good signal, report regularly, etc., that can help with that. Weak signal. This is kind of an interesting one because it's not truly the audio path issue, but it's how the whole system plays in.
Radio test. Radio test. 1, 2, 3. KJ7 NYE.
You'll notice it's having a lot harder time pulling the signal out from the standard modulation. So you're starting to get a little bit of steam behind it when you're getting the weaker signals. The other thing you'll start seeing when you're on a repeater with the weak signal is the repeater may stay broadcasting because you've got enough signal to keep the squelch tail open on it, but your audio will drop in and out depending on if it can get enough of a signal to decode the audio out of. Typical things, mic position, if you're on an HT, being able, whether your back's to where you're trying to get or we're standing facing it, better antennas, all the typical answers of how to get a better signal. Couple of other ones you'll hear. These aren't necessarily things that you can directly control in the moment, but just so you have kind of a background understanding of what some of them can start to sound like. Some of these are events we, like I said, discussed, came across up at Stanhope and have come across at other ones. Heat, RF feedback, alternator wind, not as common as it used to be with the newer cars, and they've got a lot more filtering and stuff in the system, but still occurs. And then wind noise in the background.
Radio test. Radio test. 1, 2, 3. KJ7 NYE.
And depending on the system, what that noise coming from heat can change. We thought we had a steam locomotive up there on the hill the other day, so versus just static to a steam locomotive blowing its whistle.
Radio test. Radio test. 1, 2, 3. KJ7 NYE.
RF feedback. You're going to find that more in situations where you're trying to run multiple radios close to each other, or in repeaters it can become a problem if not using good quality shielded coax between everything. So part of the output signals now jumping over onto the input train.
Radio test. Radio test. 1, 2, 3. KJ7 NYE.
Alternator noise, or that's other times you'll hear it. It's just a constant 60 hertz whine. If there's something in the house, the AC that's given it. Old wall warts are notorious for giving off a lot of RF at that and whine.
Radio test. Radio test. 1, 2, 3. KJ7 NYE.
Wind noise, sometimes it's uncontrollable. We do a lot of stuff outdoors at different events, but it's something to be considered. If you can turn, use your body as a block, something as a block, etc. No driving down the wet road with your windows down, trying to keep cool while your radio's running. You just make it so easy some days. Like I said, a couple of things we did not cover. Picket fencing, as the RF path bounces and you're receiving multiples, they don't always line back up as they come back to you. So sometimes they will add back together and get really loud. Other times they will subtract from each other and get quiet. And along with that, sometimes you will sometimes get some clicking in the audio too as they do that. It really becomes common in places like downtown on something like 440, where your short waves bouncing around between buildings, etc. Mountains, we've seen it sometimes because as you're driving, because the signal bounces off the mountain behind you. Then you come up a canyon, so it comes into you, etc. Doubling, 2 stations key at the same time. Unfortunately, on FM, it's usually just a blackout between 2 of them. Occasionally, you'll be able to pull out a syllable or 2 on each end, so you can station ending with a YE come back again first. You just kind of got to pay attention if you're trying to run a net and doubling. Any questions? That's all I had.
On the Snake Jet Boat races, which are Labor Day weekend. If anybody is interested in helping out, it's going to be in Lewiston. The last that I heard, we had 7 safety boats that did not have communications operators on them. So if you want to play on the water and watch boats go flying past you at 150 miles an hour, it can be a lot of fun. But again, the last that I heard, there was 7 safety boats that did not have amateur radio operators. So if anybody's available and is interested in helping out, let Elaine or I know, and we'll put you in touch with who's in charge of it. But with that said, thank you, everybody. Hopefully we'll see most of you a week from Saturday. Have a great night.